My name is Isabella, and I am 55 years old. All my life, I've felt just a step ahead of the curve. Always the youngest mom at school pickups. The woman who still turned heads when she walked into a room. I wore my age like a well-loved coat, familiar, comfortable, but never constricting. And I had been content in that identity, until 6 months ago, when my husband passed away, and the world seemed to lose its color. We had been together for over 3 decades. He was 12 years older than me, wise, gentle, steady. And when he left, he took with him a part of me I hadn't realized could disappear. The house, once vibrant with his energy and humor, had become a quiet place where every creak in the floor reminded me of his absence. Grief isn't always dramatic. Sometimes, it's just making tea for one, folding a towel in silence, sitting on the edge of a bed, and wondering what to do with your hands. And then something unexpected happened. A call from my daughter, her voice cheerful, light. "Mom, Oliver wants to spend the summer with you." Oliver, my grandson, 18 now. Though in my mind I still saw him as a boy with sand in his shoes and endless questions about the stars. "He said he wants to get away for a bit," she added. "He's been quiet lately, with school ending and everything." I said yes before she could finish. Something inside me stirred. Not loud, not urgent, but steady, like a closed window slowly letting in air. The day he arrived was bright, unusually warm for early June. I stood on the porch, watching as a cab pulled up. When the door opened, I barely recognized him at first. Gone was the small, shy child. In his place stood a young man, taller than I remembered, lean and confident, a duffel bag slung casually over one shoulder. "Hi, Grandma," he said, smiling as he climbed the steps. His voice had changed. It was deeper calm. "Oliver," I breathed, pulling him into a hug. "You've grown so much." He laughed softly. "You say that every time." "Well, it's true every time," I replied, ruffling his hair, though it was clear he'd outgrown the gesture. Inside, the house seemed to come alive just by having him in it. The air felt different, warmer somehow. I showed him to the guest room, but he didn't linger. He wandered through the house like he was collecting memories, tracing his fingers over photo frames, pausing in front of the old record player. "You still have these?" he asked, pulling a vinyl from the shelf. "Of course," I said. "Music like that doesn't go out of style." We had dinner outside that evening, just the two of us, at the old patio table under the mulberry tree. I'd made his favorite, chicken with rosemary potatoes, and he devoured it like he hadn't eaten a real meal in weeks. We talked about graduation, about his plans, about nothing and everything. As I cleared the dishes, I caught him watching me, not the absent-minded glance of a bored teen, but a gaze with weight, curiosity, awareness. "What?" I asked with a smile, drying my hands. He shrugged. You don't seem like someone who's been through a rough year." I paused. "You bring light with you, sweetheart," I said. The house missed it. He didn't reply, but his expression softened. That night, we sat on the couch and watched an old film I loved. Halfway through, I looked over and saw him relaxed, leaning into the cushions, his eyes flicking between the screen and me. There was something thoughtful in his face, something I couldn't quite read. The moment passed in silence, but it stayed with me. As I tucked myself into bed later, I could still feel it. Something awakening, not loud, not urgent, but undeniable. A quiet shift, like a breeze through a long-shut window. And I thought to myself, what a strange and beautiful thing, to rediscover warmth in the place you least expected. The days began to blur into something soft and golden. Morning coffee turned into long breakfasts on the porch, where sunlight dappled through the trees, and Oliver, in his effortless way, made me feel like I was part of some lovely dream I didn't want to wake from. He was attentive in a way that caught me off guard, never overbearing, but always present. I'd step into the kitchen to make tea, and find he'd already boiled the water. I'd go to lift a box from the garage, and his hands would be there, steadying mine, saying, "Grandma, you're not auditioning for a superhero movie." He teased me like he knew exactly how to disarm my mood, even on the grayest of mornings. He'd mimic my voice with exaggerated drama. "Isabella, don't forget your calcium." Then flash that grin, the one that tilted just slightly to the right, and made his eyes crinkle at the corners. Why do you always sound like you're impersonating me as a retired opera singer? I'd protest, laughing in spite of myself. Because you are a retired opera singer in my imagination, he'd say, shrugging as though it were the most reasonable explanation in the world. There were moments I caught myself watching him, studying the way his expression changed when he spoke, how he ran his hand through his hair when he was deep in thought. I knew it was just my heart aching with the joy of having company again, of being seen, not just pass by. But still, something inside me fluttered when he leaned in to tell a joke, his voice low and conspiratorial, like we were sharing secrets from the world. One evening after dinner, he pulled out the old board games from the back of the closet. "Time to see if you still have your edge, Grandma," he said, shaking the dice dramatically. "I will crush you," I warned, narrowing my eyes. "Oh, is that so?" he smirked, eyebrows raised. Bold words for someone who forgot where she put her glasses this morning. "That was one time," I huffed, though I was laughing. We played until long past sunset, the room lit only by the golden hue of a nearby lamp. He cheated shamelessly, moving his pieces when I wasn't looking, making up new rules that had nothing to do with the game. But I didn't mind. I hadn't laughed like that in months, maybe years. Later, while we were clearing the table, he stopped suddenly, resting his hand on my arm. "You're really beautiful when you laugh," he said. I stilled. It wasn't flirtatious, not quite. But it wasn't casual either. There was a softness in his voice, a warmth that settled deep beneath my skin. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I looked away quickly, pretending to focus on the dishes, but my thoughts were scattered like leaves in a sudden breeze. That night, as I lay in bed, I could still hear his laughter echoing in my head, feel the ghost of his fingers where they brushed against mine. I stared at the ceiling, blinking slowly, wondering what this quiet shift between us meant. It wasn't wrong, of that I was sure, but it was unexpected. I had spent so long being alone that I had forgotten what it was like to feel truly noticed, to be spoken to with intention, to be teased, not for amusement but for closeness. The next morning, he greeted me with 2 mugs of coffee and a sleepy smile, barefoot in the hallway, his hair still tousled from sleep. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, like it was nothing, like it was everything. And I knew in that moment that something had changed, not in a thunderous way, but like the first gentle breeze that tells you spring has arrived. It was Oliver's idea. "Let's escape the house," he said one morning over coffee, his eyes bright with a boyish excitement I hadn't seen in a long time. "Just you and me. A picnic. I know the perfect spot by the lake. Quiet. Secluded." I couldn't say no. Not to him. Not with the way he looked at me. Like I was still young enough to be pulled into something spontaneous. He prepared everything. I tried to help, but he shooed me away. "Go relax. Wear something summery," he called over his shoulder as he packed the car with a woven basket, a folded blanket, and something in a cooler that clinked softly with glass. We drove with the windows down, the wind playing with our hair, music humming low from the speakers. The road curved lazily toward the water, flanked by fields brushed with gold. It felt like a dream, a forgotten kind of day. The lake was still when we arrived, its surface a mirror catching the sky. He spread the blanket in a patch of dappled shade beneath a tree, unpacking grapes, fresh bread, slices of cheese, strawberries, and chilled water. "And then 2 wine glasses. For you," he said, pouring just enough to catch the sun in the glass, handing it to me with a smile that lingered. "Only 1 glass. Just enough to make you blush." I laughed, though I felt the blush long before the wine touched my lips. We talked for hours about nothing, about everything. He lay on his side, propped up on one elbow, watching me like I was some rare story unfolding. His eyes followed me as I stretched out under the sun, the warmth lulling me into stillness. "You know," he said suddenly, voice quiet, "you have a better figure than most girls my age." I opened one eye, a teasing smile tugging at my lips. "Oliver, are you flirting with your grandmother?" He shrugged, unbothered. "I'm just stating facts. You're stunning, Grandma. Always have been." I couldn't stop the flutter in my chest. I looked away toward the water, hoping the breeze might cool the warmth rising in my cheeks. But he saw it. He always saw. Not long after, he pulled me up with a sudden grin. Come on, he said, tugging at my hand. The lake's calling. Oliver, I'm not getting my hair wet. Too late. He had me laughing, tripping toward the edge, and then we were in. The water was cool, wrapping around us like silk. I shrieked, but he caught me in his arms and spun me like we were dancing beneath the surface of the sky. You're lighter than I expected, he said, holding me as though it were the most natural thing in the world. That's because you're stronger than I expected. I shot back, breathless. He didn't let go right away. When we finally clambered back to shore, dripping and dizzy with laughter, the sun had begun its slow descent. We dried off with the blanket, sipping the last of the wine, letting silence stretch between us like a well-worn ribbon. As we packed up to leave, he leaned close and said, "When we get home, will you bake those cookies I love? The ones with the dark chocolate chunks?" I smiled. "If you promise not to eat half the dough again." He laughed, brushing a damp strand of hair from my forehead. No promises. That night, the scent of sugar and vanilla filled the house. He sat at the kitchen table, watching me move around the oven, like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. "I missed this," he said softly. "What?" I asked, glancing over my shoulder. "Being here. With you. This close." And I knew then, without needing to ask, that we had crossed into something new. Not wrong. Just unexpected. Something tender. Something that didn't need a name. Not yet. Just the warmth of a summer night. And the sound of a boy. No, a man. Waiting patiently for cookies, and something more he hadn't yet dared to speak. The cookies cooled on the counter, the scent of dark chocolate and toasted sugar curling through the house like a memory. I placed a warm one into Oliver's waiting hands, watching his face light up as he took a bite, his satisfaction almost boyish. "You haven't lost your magic," he murmured through a mouthful. "You haven't lost your sweet tooth," I replied, ruffling his still damp hair, which he didn't even try to fix. "Let's go lie down," he said after a moment, more a suggestion than a request. "Watch something." "My room?" I asked, almost surprised by how natural the words felt. "Yeah," he said. "I like it in there. Feels like home." We made tea. His idea, of course, ever the gentleman in his quiet, unassuming way, and carried the mugs to my room. The lamp cast a soft amber glow against the walls, and we settled on the bed, side by side atop the quilt I'd had for years. He brought the laptop, propped it between us, and after some browsing he clicked on a film. Something French, romantic, about an older woman and a younger man. An accidental love born out of solitude and curiosity. He watched the screen, but I felt his eyes on me more than once. Not intrusive. Not demanding. Just present. I pretended not to notice at first, focusing on the screen, on the way the lovers touched each other's hands so gently. There was a line in the movie that lingered longer than it should have. She never looked for him, but he found her, right where she had begun to forget how to be seen. I felt that line settle somewhere deep. Halfway through he shifted beside me. "Grandma," he said softly, his voice smaller than usual. "My stomach feels weird. I think I overdid it on the cookies." I turned to look at him, his brow slightly furrowed, his hand resting over his navel. "Want me to get something for it?" I offered. He hesitated. "Could you maybe just rub it? Like when I was little. It used to help." I paused. Just for a moment. Not because I didn't want to, but because I hadn't touched him like that in years. And now he wasn't a little boy anymore. Still, I nodded, shifting to sit beside him. He lifted his shirt wordlessly, revealing smooth, warm skin flushed slightly from heat or something else. I pressed my fingers gently to the center of his stomach, beginning slow, circular motions. He sighed. A deep, quiet breath that seemed to settle into the room like steam from a teacup. "It still helps," he murmured, his eyes closed. For a while, neither of us said anything. The only sounds were the movie's soft dialogue, his breathing, and the rustle of the covers as I moved my hands in small, soothing circles. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way his body relaxed under my touch, or the way his skin felt warmer than it should have been. Maybe it was the way his lips parted, breath deepening, a faint flush on his cheeks. I didn't plan to do it. It wasn't something I'd even allowed myself to think. But my hand paused, resting flat and still on his stomach, And in that quiet second where the world seemed to exhale with me, I leaned forward and kissed him. Just one soft kiss, right over the center of his belly. A kiss so light it barely counted as one at all. But it happened, and I couldn't pretend it didn't. When I looked up, his eyes were open, watching me. Not shocked, not confused, just there, like he had been waiting for something. Like the silence we had both held was finally beginning to unravel. I started, but no words came. He reached for my hand, held it against his skin. His thumb brushed my wrist. He didn't say anything either. But in the space between that breath and the next, I knew. We had stepped into something neither of us understood yet. Something tender. Something real. Something that had no map, but was drawing itself around us like the last light of day. My hand lingered, resting gently on the place where I had kissed him. I felt his heartbeat, soft, steady, a little faster than before. And beneath my fingertips, the warm rhythm of something I couldn't name. He hadn't moved, hadn't pulled away. He simply watched me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite decipher. Trust, perhaps. A need he didn't have words for. And then he whispered, "Can you keep going?" There was no command in his voice. Just the quiet asking of someone who felt safe enough to be vulnerable. And something in me answered, wordless and automatic. I nodded, returning my fingers to his skin, continuing the slow, familiar circles I'd started minutes earlier. His breathing deepened again, and I focused on the motion, gentle, steady, tender. I tried not to overthink, not to question what this moment meant. Just be present. With him. For him. But something was changing. His body tensed briefly beneath my touch, then softened again. His breath came faster for a moment, then caught, like he was holding back. And though I wasn't looking at his face, I could feel the way his chest rose and fell, his lips parted, his hands gripping the edge of the quilt beside him. Then he exhaled, long and slow, like releasing a wave he hadn't known he was riding. I paused, unsure of what I'd just witnessed, what we had just shared in the silence. My hands stilled, and in the stillness between us, the air felt thicker, more charged than before. And then he turned to me, not hurried, not confused. He leaned in slowly, like the world had narrowed down to only this room, this moment, this breath between us. And he kissed me. Soft, careful, a question wrapped in warmth. His lips met mine like a secret finally spoken. And before I could react, I felt my hand curl gently against his cheek, pulling him closer for one more second than I should have. It wasn't a kiss of impulse. It wasn't wild or hungry. It was deliberate, almost reverent. A whisper between hearts that had been quietly drifting toward one another for longer than either of us had admitted. When we finally pulled apart, I kept my eyes closed, because opening them would mean facing the truth of what we'd just done. And I wasn't sure what I'd find in his gaze. But then, I felt his fingers thread through mine. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to." I opened my eyes and shook my head, silencing him with just the press of my thumb against his hand. "Don't be," I whispered. "Just don't be." There were 1,000 things I wanted to say. Questions, doubts, fears. But none of them fit in the stillness that followed. In the way he leaned his head on my shoulder like he used to when he was small. In the way I rested my cheek against his hair, letting the moment stretch like twilight between us. That night we stayed like that. Side by side, the movie long